Professor Greenberger, Michael Greenberger, who's sitting directly to my right, is a professor in the School of Law at the University of Maryland and teaches a course in futures, options, and derivatives, which is a subject that I'm sure we'll get plenty of discussion today. He's most infamous, however, for being Brooksley Born's wingman in the mid-90s at the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, when they were trying to at least take a little tiny step to, if not exactly regulate derivatives, at least understand them better, get their arms around them, try to do something so that the government wouldn't be blind, as it turned out to be, a decade plus later, as derivatives came to dominate the financial world. So let's welcome Professor Greenberger. I began by saying that this is a fortuitous day to be having this panel, and obviously it is, because yesterday the Senate passed, by a vote of 60 to 38, the Obama administration's and Congress's financial reform package. It just seems like a pretty obvious place to start. I'm going to ask a broad question to each of the panelists about what they think of it in broad terms, and then we'll sort of drill down on various aspects, and then we'll broaden the discussion to things that aren't really dealt with in it, like capital requirements, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Europe and how scared we should be, and where we are as a country right now in terms of our economy and our financial system. So let me start with you, George, and ask you quite simply, do you view the bill that passed yesterday in the Senate as something that's hopeful, something that's definitively helpful, or something that's nebulous?
Well, I think it's good to have it done, but it doesn't really address the problems of the system. It leaves it to the Fed to do whatever is necessary, so it doesn't impede action in the future. But if it is put forward as something that now reforms the system and the reform is thereby accomplished, then I think it would be very misleading. It would be an unfortunate conclusion that we have now solved the problems that the crash of 2008 has revealed.
But certainly that's how the president has characterized it.
Pardon?
Certainly that is how the president has characterized it.
No, that's not how, that's why I'm saying that if that were the conclusion, then it would be misleading.
Okay.
And also, I think that the timing of this act is not the right one. It's either too late or too early.
Okay.
Because if you had introduced some reforms at a time when let's say the industry was not able to exercise its lobbying powers, then maybe you could have gotten something more valuable. But it's too early because the banking system hasn't yet recovered, and it still needs to earn its way out of a hole. And therefore, the regulations really could have waited, except for the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, which I will leave to Elizabeth Warren to explain. But that was really necessary, and it was urgent. And if we had just had that proposed, it would have been very valuable. But this sort of overall catch-all kind of reform should have waited. And I think we will have to revisit it in the years to come.
Elizabeth, what do you think?
Well, I am going to focus on the consumer agency, and I'm pleased. It's not perfect. The auto dealer exception.
Well, explain that in case
Oh,
people
sorry.
don't know.
So what basically went through is a structurally strong consumer, it's now called a bureau, but an independent rule writing authority, a lot of teeth, to really to take a very broken consumer credit market, one that has really transformed itself over the last 15 years or so into a market that's designed around tricks and traps, and to be able to say, that one's not going to work anymore. We're going to go back to a market that really works, where consumers can see what they've got, they can really price it, they can really see the risks in it, and make direct comparisons among products. So you really get back to a competitive market, a more level playing field for consumers. And this was really all about structure. It really was not about new sets of rules. Part of the problem in this area is we have a lot of consumer financial protection rules. They're just the enforcement of them, and the rule writing is spread among 7 different bureaucracies around Washington, and it's nobody's main issue. It gets flicked off into groups or into agencies that either don't care about it or affirmatively are hostile to it. So what this was about was starting with a pair of scissors, taking those functions from elsewhere in government, putting them in one place, so that you've got one group, you can slim it down, make it effective, and make it responsive to the American people. Because now there's some place to go, there's somebody to hold accountable.
Will they have an enforcement mechanism?
Yeah. So this one has rule writing authority. It has enforcement mechanisms, you know, like everything. It's got a little jury rigging in it over the largest financial institutions, which is in some markets a huge part. For example, credit cards, where you have enormous concentration. Top 8 issuers have more than 80% of the market, and over non-bank lenders, which may make you pause for a minute, but the point is all of those folks have grown up over the last couple of decades, like payday lenders and check cashing, mortgage brokers that are outside a depository institution. So it gets strong enforcement there. First line enforcement for the smaller banks, for the community banks, is with their primary regulator, but everybody in that group has the same set of rules. So I think it's going to have enforcement teeth.
And you're not worried that it's housed in the Federal Reserve?
George, when it comes to consumers and government, I'm always worried. Do I look like a woman who sleeps at night?
Well, Barney Frank, I mean, that's an interesting thought. Barney Frank said last night on somebody's show that he said all the Fed is a mail drop for these guys. That he said they are going to be housed in the Fed, which we had to do for political reasons, but the Fed has no authority over them and really can't touch them in any way. Now, I guess I want to ask you if that's really what you think is true, and I just want to add, you know, the problem with the Fed always on consumer protection was they put safety and soundness. They cared much more about the safety and soundness of the banking system than they did about what happened to consumers. And indeed, there were many times when gouging consumers was good for the safety and soundness of the banking system because it brought the banks more profit.
Short term.
Well, right, and look what happened long term. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, is there any concern, do you think that Barney's analysis about the Fed sort of not being able to do anything to the consumer agency is correct?
I think he's right. I mean, I think the way it's been designed is that the agency has an address within the Fed. It's going to show up on an org chart within the Fed. But I'm all about functional independence. You know, you can call something, I don't care what name you give it. The real question is, what does it do? And it has effectively independent rule writing authority. It's got good, strong enforcement. It's got a head that will be appointed directly by the president. And it's got, one of the best parts of it, it's got independent budget. It just automatically gets a portion of the Fed's budget. And the Fed has to hand it over. So I think it's got all the indicia of being independent and strong.
Michael?